Hi everyone. So I figured I would film this little video here just because I thought the topic was interesting, and frankly this opportunity was just too good to pass up with all the snow through the village and stuff like that. I'm in a historic museum restoration village, and yeah, it's, as you can see, pretty snowy out. We're closed to the public for another month or so, but I'm lucky enough to volunteer and work here, so I figured I would do this video and talk a little bit about what winter would have been like in sort of pre-modern America. This village isn't colonial. It's actually restored to about, say, 1800, 1820, 30, something like that, early 1800s, pre-Civil War definitely. But some of this would have applied certainly to the colonies and stuff as well. But and hopefully I don't make too much noise here walking around, but I guess we'll have to see. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to talk about is how warm people would have been, because we have this idea of sort of the 1800s as everyone sort of huddled around a nice warm fire and everybody's house was nice and warm, and it would have been cold outside and snowing, but inside the house would have been nice and warm and everyone would have been cozy around the fire. These houses are not as well insulated as houses around here or around today, so they would have been incredibly cold. There's accounts of people being, 2 feet from fireplaces. They definitely would have had wood burning fireplaces. Some people probably would have had coal, but wood burning would have been the most common. And there's accounts of people, standing across the room from a fireplace and, water buckets freezing and water cups freezing over there. So the houses aren't very well insulated. Around the fire, it might have been warm enough, but, if you stray more than even a couple feet away from it, you probably would have been quite cold. So what would people have done to stay warm? Well, they would have worn very warm clothes inside the house, wool coats, wool hats and socks and stockings and things like that, and wool dresses for the women. So they would have stayed completely warm, they would have stayed completely dressed up, I should say, and that would have kept them at least a little bit warm. But everybody kind of complained about the cold back then. You could even find like Thomas Jefferson writing, complaining about how cold it was. That's another thing, is places even down south, like Virginia, there's accounts of pretty heavy snowfall, way heavier than obviously they get now, I think. Pretty heavy snowfall even down in Virginia and places like that. Another thing that people tend not to notice is they think that, again, all through the winter, everybody was sort of huddled up inside, and because of that, they didn't really leave, and nothing really moved during that time, right? Goods and services kind of just stopped. More, I guess, per pound of goods probably would have gotten moved over the winter than over the summer. We're getting into the town square here, completely untouched. I'm the first person to walk on all of this because I'm the first person crazy enough to do it. But anyway, more, at least by pounds probably, would have moved over the winter, because as you can see with the roads here, they're completely snowed over. They wouldn't have plowed anything, but they would have set up, put my finger in this screen, they would have set up sleds and sleighs, and they would have moved goods and stuff around by horse with sleds, with everything. And so that's how things would have moved in the winter. And if you've ever, tried to pull something on a sled, it's actually easier than pulling it even on a cart or with wheels. I had to put on my gloves there, sorry about that. But yeah, so they would have put stuff on sleds and probably carried them with, teams of oxen or horses. And yeah, you can move more weight with, the same horse or the same ox if you're using a sled than if you're using a cart with wheels. So I think that that's something that people don't notice. Again, they would have moved a lot. The general store would have kept stocked with things like that, and farmers would have moved a lot of goods and services, and people would have moved around at least a little bit. You know, they wouldn't have been cooped up in their houses from October or November through to March or April. So you see down the road. And again, there also people would have had, that was a job back in the day, was to pack snow down on the roads. So on days like this, they had these big sort of carts almost that had like sort of skis on them, and you would weigh them down and you would drive them over the snow and sort of pack it down, almost like sand, so that it wasn't as fluffy as this, and nothing, especially the horses, wouldn't sink into it. They could sort of float on top of it, and their carts would float on top of it. And again, they probably would have moved more tonnage of, you can move up this way, I guess, more tonnage of stuff over the winter. Anyway, those are two sort of things that I wanted to talk about. I'll throw in some pictures here of some, you know, historic, some of the items I was talking about, like those sleighs. Oh, another thing I wanted to mention, we think of things like Jingle Bells and like sleigh ride songs as Christmas songs, but they were just sort of generic winter songs, because again, sleigh rides would have been very common ways to get around throughout the winter. So it wouldn't have been just a Christmas thing. It would have been a whole winter sleigh ride sort of thing. And Jingle Bells was just a winter song, not a Christmas song exactly. So anyway, like I said, that's all I really wanted to say here. This was just too good an opportunity to pass up walking through this kind of village. Hopefully my footsteps didn't get too annoying, but we're walking up to the old schoolhouse now. So I figure that's all I got to say.